Evening. Look at me being almost on time. Almost. Taking a leaf out of my book for us. Sleep is for the weak, as they say. Thank you, Delta. This is another Claire special. So, what are we doing? It's Caravella Day, isn't it? So, I think what we'll do is we'll see whether we can get the Caravella flyable tonight, so it can actually be like properly piloted and actually do its job in the galaxy. To see how far we get with that. Something I have done over the past couple of days is in an effort to fix a fatal error we keep getting, and it's one of those fatal errors that just says fatal error. There's no real log message. It's just like kernel 32 has come up with like a null memory address, but where it came from is a mystery. Fun. So I have a suspicion that it might be coming from this plugin that we use. So we've got this global event handler, which is great because it means you can send out global events. You don't need to cast to the target, you don't need a blueprint interface, it's just a global event that anyone can subscribe to. Brilliant. But I think it might be causing the errors. So what I'm doing is I'm migrating everything over to Epic's built-in gameplay messaging subsystem, which means you can set up these really nice nested channels for sending data on. So I've gone through and started setting up the startup process so that it's actually using these messaging channels rather than using the plugin. So we can start cutting the plugin out of the equation and start using this instead. But like everything uses the plugin, so it's quite a long process to get that switched over. Oh, Darren, thank you. Very much appreciated. Here, have a heart. Yeah, so another thing I did yesterday, and I apologize for blinding everybody, is I went through and I kind of documented our startup process. There's a few little sub-steps along the way here that I haven't bothered mentioning, but this is kind of what the game goes through in order to load the game. And as you can see, there are like 29 main steps of setting things up, loading things, preparing for things, setting some variables. It's quite a staged process we're going through, and I want to keep hitting this and keep refining it until it is absolutely like flawlessly stable. And I want to make sure that nothing in this list is referencing anything that is a plugin or anything that's non-standard within the engine, to make sure that we have the best possible chance of ruling out anything that might be causing an issue. So yeah, it's a bit time consuming to go through and set this up, but I think ultimately that's the best way of making sure that the game start is the best it possibly can be. But before we get into any of that, it's competition day. So let me just grab random.org, pop that in there, set that to 10,000. I believe Claire has sent me the list of numbers. Oh, there we go. Nice reference to Pi there. Okay, so as usual, Max and AJ have been very generous rather, and have donated some captain ranks, so we shall do those first. Wow, Barmy Jarmy, thank you. This is a dream game that I've always hoped someone would decide to make, so I can't wait to see what the end product will be. Yeah, thank you. It's the dream game that we all wanted to play, and no one was making it, so I guess this is a bit of a hold my beer moment. We decided to make the game because no one else was. Thank you, very much appreciated. Claire, are you ready? Great. Okay, so we'll give away our first number. So this is for a captain rank, and the first one is 3985. I'll just make sure that actually that we've got all those populated. Yeah, we do. That goes to Will RR. Congratulations. You are now a captain. Just waiting for Claire to give the all clear. Okay, and our next captain rank goes to 914. It's very rare that we get a low number in this. It goes to Hurst. Congratulations. You are now a captain. Okay, and the first key goes to 1753. Apollo Prefect, congratulations. And the next one goes to 2043. Talanu. Congrats. Okay, last one then. 3365. That goes to Kumundi Moko. Kumudi Moko. Sorry, I probably butchered that. But congratulations anyway. Have a key. Okay, well, Claire will be in touch. Keep an eye on Discord and you will get a ping. And then we will hand you the ranks and keys as needed. Well done all. Right, let's get rid of them, get rid of that, get rid of that. Actually, we might need that. Okay, then. So when we load up the Caravella, it's going to have to be with this new startup in mind. So things might be a little bit twitchy until that entire list is complete and working. So let's grab our Caravella. whole load of nothing. Yes, do we not have... Oh, we do. There it is. Yeah, so this space environment level is duplicated and pulled in from all the different levels that we have. So every ship is going to pull in the same level for the galaxy, so we can keep it modular. Just wanted to make sure this was actually the same one and not a separate one that I'd made. But yeah, it's coming from the common folder. So that contains the galaxy gen, system gen, our post-process, and anything else that we might need. There we go. Alright, so we want deck 2 sheet metal and deck 1 sheet. There we go. Okay, so there's the bridge as it stands. So last stream we were putting in the electrical systems for the bridge. So we got as far as cabling up everything to this box. This box was receiving power, and we stuck a cable under the floor for providing power to the holo display. So I guess the next thing we need to do is make sure that we have, I guess, a ring with everything connected to it. It's the best way of doing that. So going back to the whole segmented design kind of thing. So with each of these being a discrete segment, the idea is that there will be a separate cable behind each of these wall panels. So like the lights, actually if we turn the ceiling on a minute. There. So these lighting panels, like say that one for example, that one's going to be powered with a drop cable that comes down through the wall and connects to the mains cable that's running along through the wall there. So really, in that regard, pretty much every single panel is connected to an individual length of cable with joins all the way down. So every time the cable goes through like a bulkhead wall like this for each one, there needs to be like a rubber bulkhead and some kind of join in the cable, because they need to be airtight. So, bearing that in mind, we need to do something similar-ish for the bridge. Now, the holo display is a high voltage system, so it has its own feed. So that will have a separate feed from this box, because it's obviously drawing a lot of power, a lot more than just the usual UI screens. Unlike the the screens in Star Trek that have like massive amounts of electroplasma flowing behind them, which is why they explode in crew members' faces, ours will literally just be LCD screens without that kind of annoying a tendency to explode in your face. But we still need an electrical ring going around through the floor, and I guess we'll have something like a gang socket, I suppose, under the floor where all of these things can connect back into, because ultimately they all need power and they all need connectivity. And I suppose, speaking of connectivity, we can run data cables the same way. So we've got this one here, so we've got our sensors panel there, which we were going to offset slightly so it's at an angle. And we also need to have a think about just the general layout of the bridge here. Again, it's smaller than the Caravella, smaller than the Magellan even, so everyone's going to be a little bit more intimate and closer together, and we're going to have dual roles when it comes to each station. Yeah, like, see, on the Magellan we've got tactical and defense as part of the same console section, but they're two separate screens and two separate seats. So we'll have to do a combined just tactical station here that has both. So we'll have to have a think about what kind of activity takes place on the defenses one. It might end up being a UI screen that we cull at some point, and merge it into just a unified tactical station. It really depends on how much work is required in terms of balancing shields and diverting power to different shield segments depending on where the threat is located. Right now, if we're doing that in a very granular manual way, it is going to require its own station. And if that is the case, then having a unified station here won't work. It's going to be too much on one console for one person to deal with. So, but yeah, I guess we'll think through that as we go. But I am wondering whether or not we just do a bit of a width floor layout in here with some carpet, just to get an idea for like where the walkway's going to be, how human foot traffic is going to navigate around the bridge space, so then we can fit the consoles in and maybe have room around them to walk around. I guess we definitely want to be able to walk around the holo display, with that being the main information source for the ship or for the bridge. Again, we won't have view screens like they have in Star Trek. We're having a 3D display, because information is always better displayed in 3 dimensions. So we can walk around it and look at a tactical situation from every angle. But that means we do need the physical room to walk around it, which means that those chairs wouldn't be able to be quite so close. But then the further back, well, the more room we give them, the further we're moving away from the helm. And we don't want that whole having to shout at the helmsman kind of thing. But it might be unavoidable. Although maybe we can make this smaller. I guess it doesn't need to be quite that wide. Just make that visible a minute. Yeah, so if that's our general size of our hologram, then this, I guess, only needs to come to about there, with projectors pointing up. Yeah, okay. Right, let's swap ships a minute. Yeah, the Magellan's not a small ship. Why am I drunk? What am I doing? What have I missed? The Magellan is, off the top of my head, about 150 meters wide, 150 meters tall, and 315 long, I want to say. About that. About the same size as Voyager, all in. Just taller, obviously, because of the ring. Ah, yes. Yeah, we were having a good chat about that in the shower, as we generally do. We tend to have our business meetings in the shower. And yeah, we were talking about going to early access, how we're going to handle that, and like at what point are we going to say, yes, we're going to hit the target, or no, we're not. We'll try and give people at least, I would say, 2 to 3 months notice if we're not going to hit the December target. Obviously that's going to be a very fluid thing, because as we build out systems over the course of the year, we'll have a clearer picture of where we are and versus where we need to be. So my plan for the next 7 months or so, I suppose, is to work purely on systems. So I'm going to do very little in the way of modeling and graphics and things, and just focus on the code. Because if we can get all of the base code done and at least somewhat polished, then all we need to do for early access at that point is just do the geometry, do the graphics, do the modeling. But at least we can get the code base done, and even if we're just dealing with like cubes and spheres as our objects in the world, at least the code's working. And the code is the quick bit. That's the bit I can do quickly. It takes me so much longer to model things than it does to code things. I guess I'm just more comfortable in code. But yeah, so we'll do that first, and then we'll see where we're at. So I imagine probably around kind of September, October time, we'll be able to make some kind of a judgment call on whether or not we're actually going to make it for December for early access. But we shall see. It really depends on how much I can get done, how quickly I can do it, and then we need to, I guess this is the judgment call really. It's a case of like, is there enough content within the game to really warrant an early access release? Because we don't want to go to early access if half the stuff's missing, like most of the gameplay pillars aren't there, and we're not kind of representing the game the best it can be. Because the moment we go to early access, we're opening the game up for reviews. People are going to have certain expectations, and as the saying goes, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So we don't want to make a mistake of going out too soon if the game's not ready. But fortunately, we don't have a publisher or anyone kind of pushing timescales on us. It's very much something that we decide for ourselves. So we're in the position where we can just wait until it's ready. But obviously, there is a point where it gets too long. But we will play it by ear and see. Yeah, exactly, that's it. Can I remember which combination of Shift, Control and Alt you pressed to do a unified scale? Right, so if we do it maybe 25% smaller, give us that space. Then we can have a look at some flooring. big is that in real terms? Yeah, 1.5 meters exactly. That's a nice round number. I like nice round numbers. Yeah, see, generally I'd leave a 2 meter walkway wherever possible, but I think in this instance that's going to be too much. Yeah, it's not a big bridge, so we're going to be limited as to how much space we have. So if our walkway is that, group that up a minute. So if we were to use about that much space for our chairs, then we'd want, so I don't really want to put them completely opposite like that. So we don't want like a copy of the Magellan Bridge. Yeah, maybe 60 degrees. Try that. So that would be the main consoles. And obviously we've got the helm, which would just be around there. I can always move them round a bit more if need be. Which means our chair space would be that. That gives us a grand total of... that's not too bad actually. That's again about 1.5 meters before the wall. Although obviously it is a slanted roof, so we might have a headroom issue there. What if we stick to the same general layout? Let's group that up a minute. So that would be a 1.5 meter walkway, which if we were to put at 30 degrees, actually let's group that up first. So 30 degrees there, 30 degrees there. And then we could have our railing. So if we were to give us about 10 centimeters worth of wood, maybe, or some other material there. So unlike the Magellan, we won't do like a pit in the middle of the bridge. So we won't have a lot of vertical change because it's a small bridge. There's really not enough room for it. But we can kind of zone the area by way of floor materials instead. We can have a little bit of elevation change, but not a huge amount. I'm wondering whether or not they wouldn't be better just being a little bit further away. So that would be at 45 degrees there. YouTube has crashed. First time of the evening. So if we were to make this particular platform a bit wider to accommodate 2 chairs. I guess that one would have to be 90. Component this up a minute so that we're not constantly having to redo the same thing. Right. So if we were to have a layout like that, and I still want to offset these a little bit, but I fear it might end up with things being a bit squidged. And we could maybe move that 5 degrees in. We could do something like that. I mean, it keeps a consistent gap to the edges there and gives it an ever so slight forward-facing direction. So if we're dual rolling this, then rather than having rear stations or side stations on the bridge, we can continue to make these dual seats, but we could have, say, engineering next to tactical, and then maybe environmental control next to science. But because if we're rolling science and comms into the same physical station, then we could do with someone sat next to them. Obviously helm is always going to be helm, so that will just be what it is. Just get rid of that a minute. going to export this out as a test. Yeah, to be honest, Delta, that's not necessarily impossible either. I think the only thing that gives me pause with doing that is that the science guy will have their back to the holo display, which isn't necessarily the end of the world because they're not the one that it's for. I mean, the holo display is there for the command staff, not the science guy, but it is nice to be able to see it as you're doing stuff. But yeah, that is an option. Alright, let's just re-export that as well, the right size. Feels a better kind of size, which means they're probably roughly in the right spot already. Yep, there will definitely be a ship-wide PA at some point. So that would put them there, and that is actually pretty much where I guesstimated it would be, so that's not too bad. And the helm's pretty much spot on, so yeah. So that'll give us a walking plan of basically this. I'm not sure we're going to have enough headroom around it, but can do there because of the shape of the hull. I was hoping we'd have room for like a little conference table or something over here, but I don't think we're going to. I think it's just going to get in the way. We could have like a little drinks machine though. That might be quite nice. Little coffee facility. We also don't have any kind of bathroom on A deck, so I think this space back here, in addition to the labs, is going to need to include a bathroom of some kind. Yeah, the more we look at it, the more we may have to extend this by one segment. We shall see how much we can fit and where. Let's get rid of our scale references a minute. We don't need them anymore. Although, let's borrow him. Yeah, that's definitely not walkable. Especially not when you've also got the paneling on top, because that's going to be another couple of inches. So it's like crouching room only around there. Maybe we can just steal a little bit of room around here in order to give just about enough walking room around there. We will have windows here as well, so there'll be another 2 windows punched through. Yeah. And to be honest, we can move these in a bit. They don't need to be all the way out there. I mean, like console wise, we can use a little bit of the overhang there for the console and then just bring in this outer edge just to reclaim a little bit of space, just to make just enough room to walk. It doesn't need to be comfortable, but it just needs to be enough room to not crack your head on a beam. I think this is one of those things I spoke about when first starting the build of this ship, was wanting to make sure that things fitted before I started building the outer hull. So, you know, you measure up the reactor, you measure up the engines, work out how those things are connecting together, work out where your fuel tanks are going to go, and then once you've got your infrastructure set, then you build a hull around it. And we kind of didn't do that as much as we should have. So, like with the bridge, it would have been more prudent to build the bridge layout and then design the hull around it, just to guarantee that we've got the space we need, rather than trying to fit it in after the fact. I think that's something we might either adjust the angle across there, which is not impossible. Oh yeah, we'll just see how much we can squeeze it in, really. But yeah, it's all a learning experience, isn't it? But Anywho, that means our console would be over here. Something like that. Yes, it's going to be floor projected. So this base here will have the projectors in it. So it's unlike the Magellan. This one's being projected up, not down. That said, I am going to raise the ceiling up in a little bit of a dome above there. And we may even just stick a window in the top as well, just to raise the ceiling visually. Because as much as the ceiling is quite tall, it's almost 3 meters tall. It feels quite cramped and low when you're in there. More levels, that doesn't help. I will tell you. Each section is 12 meters. So right now the whole ship is, give or take a sticky out bit, is 108 meters long. So that would take it up to about 115-ish. Again, give or take sticky out bits. Because the main issue we have is this ship is designed to fulfill largely the same role as the Caravella, just on a much smaller scale. So things like hydroponics, science labs, some kind of refinery for raw materials, the ability to stay out in space long term, upwards of a year, and have everything on board that's required to support the crew for that length of time, and support itself for that length of time. So the ability to fuel scoop, the ability to again mine things and refine the ore into materials, having a 3D printing lab, some kind of a workshop. So there's a lot of infrastructure that the ship needs in order to survive long term in space. And every time you add something, obviously it takes up physical volume on the ship. And the issue we have on A deck, or deck 1 rather, is we've only got this little bit of room here behind the main stairwell, which was fully reserved for science labs, but now we need to fit a bathroom in there and maybe some kind of a conference room in there. So the more we need extra rooms, the more the ship is too small and can't fit them. We've already started double bunking the crew as well. Yeah, I guess I've mentioned it before, but this is kind of what I like about the design, is that the size and the scale of the ship is very much being driven by the requirements of the mission, or the requirements of the intended purpose of the vessel. So it's a struggle to make it smaller, because then it won't fit all the things in it that we need. It's just it's kind of a fascinating thought experiment. or engineering challenge, whichever which way you want to look at it. Yes, Caesar, I will be. Yeah, when I was just spacing these out, I didn't think about what the pilot's looking at, so yes. We will be losing that pillar and moving those windows. It will also have side windows as well, so they all need recutting through there. But that's fine, that's not the end of the world. Hey, Woodland Knight. David, let me measure it and see. 38 feet. Yeah, near enough. About half a metre difference. In terms of the luxury yacht feeling, yes, we still want to have a luxury yacht feeling to it. So, as much as it requires utility aboard the ship, we want the general look and feel and the decor and everything to be luxury yacht in its feel. So, like, the bridge is going to be maybe even slightly more luxury yachty than the Caravella, than the Magellan. I'm getting it mixed up now. And like when it comes to like corridors and things, obviously this isn't finished, but you know, it's kind of Magellan-ish, because ultimately the same shipyard worked on both ships, but it's just things like this, or these accents and flares that the Magellan doesn't have. Just, you know, we want to add those luxury yacht stylings all throughout the ship. So everywhere you go, there's that feel of luxury, of exclusivity, you know, that kind of high-end yacht feel. Apart from engineering, which will be quite engineering-y. There's going to be a lot of exposed wires, exposed pipes. It's going to be much more like, if you've ever seen the engine room of a luxury yacht, there's nothing luxury about it. It's always quite cramped and very utilitarian. And we'll have the same here in the engineering section. Yes, yeah, exactly. This is a private corporation, so you know, it needs to represent that corporation. Yeah, when it comes to the Admiral's yacht, which is the next ship I'll be building after this one, once this one's done and polished, yeah, we absolutely need to be making the Admiral's yacht, and I will once again improve the process when making that to make sure that we design what we need, where we need it, before we go thinking about the final shape of the vessel. The Admiral's yacht's going to have a lot more in the way of entertaining than this ship does. And I suppose one of the questions / challenges is we're going to have a wide range of different vessels that are for different purposes within the game, and not all of them are going to be capable of deep space exploration. Like, you know, say a military destroyer, that ship is not going to have the resources it needs to be able to survive in space long term. It's going to need supplies, it's going to need some kind of logistics chain in order to keep it going. It's not designed for that kind of mission scope, whereas a deep space exploration vessel is designed for that and has all the stuff it needs. So when it comes to the Admiral's yacht, either we have to have some kind of modular section that can be swapped out for different purposes, or we just kind of bite the bullet and say, no, you can't explore with this ship because this ship doesn't have everything that you need on it, unless we implement some other way of keeping the ship running through, say, trading with alien species, or scavenging for things you need on planetary surfaces, or just basically making it possible but way harder. So on something like the Magellan or the Caravella, where everything is in-house, you can do it all yourself, and it's easy to go and explore space on that vessel. If you choose to explore space on a vessel that's not equipped for that, then we need to think about how to make it possible but also challenging, because you're using the wrong tool for the job, if that makes sense. Like, you wouldn't take an exploration ship into a combat scenario because that ship is not equipped for that, whereas a heavily armored military vessel would be. But this is all stuff that we need to balance and play test and work out the best way to do that when it comes to it. For now, we're just focusing on those exploration ships. Yeah, I like the idea of, say with a cargo cruiser, I like the idea of being able to sacrifice cargo space for things like a hydroponics, for things like a refinery. So it's a modular ship with a modular design where you can just swap things out depending on mission spec. So if you want to use the cargo cruiser for deep space exploration, you can do so just by, sacrificing its ability to be a cargo cruiser by swapping those modules out. And we could do the same thing maybe with the Admiral's yacht, where we sacrifice guest suites and conference rooms and entertainment space for hydroponics and a refinery and other stuff that we would need to keep that ship running long term. But yeah, again, we will work that out as we go. Yes, David, very much so. Our first military vessel, the Agamemnon class, will be a carrier. So it will have a flight deck with a number of other smaller craft, be them strike craft or bombers or something like that. But yeah, it will have its own squadron of something or other. And that thing's going to be heavily armoured, very well equipped weapon-wise, and designed for combat. So it's not going to be a luxury vessel. It's going to be rough and hard and ready for combat. Yep. So given the size of this vessel, and given the fact that, like this corridor, for example, every floor panel has health, can be damaged, can be replaced, pulled up, whatever, as can every wall panel and every ceiling panel. Like everything is an actor in the world with a health value and some kind of code running on it. And behind that, obviously, there's a pipe and a cable which has health values and code running on it. So if you picture that for an entire ship, you've got hundreds and hundreds of individual pieces that are all running code and all have their individual stats and health and such. If you scale that up to something the size of the Magellan, you're talking multiple thousands worth of these things. So all of that has to be loaded into memory, all of that has to be managed. If you have more than one of those ships in the same game world, then all of a sudden you're doubling the CPU load, you're doubling the amount of network bandwidth trying to replicate all of this stuff. And generally you're going to have a bad day. But for something the size of this, a much smaller ship with much less on it, like this is the size of one of the Magellan's engine pods, so you could probably have a number of these in the same game, with the same overall impact as one Magellan. So the idea with multi-ship games is we'll have to work out the size class of each ship, and then how many of that size class you can have within the game. And it's all really down to the interior and how complicated the interior is, because that's the thing that's costing the CPU, costing RAM, costing network bandwidth. And when you start a game, if you select something the size of the Magellan, you won't have the option to add any other vessels. Whereas if you select like the Caravella, then you might have the option to add more Caravellas or other ships of that size. But we'll have to see how that works in practice. But I wouldn't expect to see some like 2 Magellans in the same game. I think the interior is just too complex for that. Yeah, but even with the proxies, you still need interiors. And like, we're going to be obviously doing other ships and stations and things within the game world, and those things are going to need interiors, and then those things are going to be costing on the CPU. So there's a very careful balancing act of how much stuff we can load into RAM, and VRAM especially. Like if we rock up to an alien station, and that alien station is obviously going to have its own custom models, it's going to have its own custom textures. Like, all those textures are different from the Magellan, so all those textures need to be loaded into VRAM. And again, it's just this constant balancing act of how much, in terms of assets, can you squeeze into the resources that you have. And yeah, we just have to see. Suck it and see, basically. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll scale it down. Anywho, yeah, when it comes to proxy ships, like alien vessels, so if we've got an alien vessel which is not one that's boardable, just like generic random alien of the week that you rock across in some star system, those vessels we could have hundreds of in the world because they don't have interiors. It's not the proxy that costs, it's the interior and all the stuff, the complexity of the interior, the electrical sim, the fluid sim, like the reactor sim, and all that stuff, all that sim stuff that's going on inside the ship. That's the thing that costs resources. If it's just a proxy flying around, or just an alien vessel that just has an outer hull and that's it, yeah, we can have hundreds of them. That's not an issue. It's all about the interiors. Anywho, right, so our goal here is to make this flyable, and then to do that we need all of these things connected to power, although we'll use the our fake power for now just to test it all. And we need a better way of referencing which ship we're on. Yeah, we will work on that. Let's make sure we can see all these so I can get them where they need to be. Yeah, the PvP mode is going to be separate from the main game. It's more of a scenario, and the idea is, and I've kind of got this from playing Dark Age of Camelot years ago. I really loved like castle siege warfare in Dark Age of Camelot, and I'd like to do the same thing with ships, So basically, your team and the opposing team both have a vessel, and it's not going to be the same size as the Magellan. It's going to be a fair bit smaller than that. Again, because we've got resource management to think of. And the idea being is that you have to disable each other's ship, and then board each other's ship, and then capture the bridge. And the first team to capture the opposing bridge is the winner. Quite straightforward, really, but it's going to involve taking down your opponent's shields, disabling their vessel, getting in a shuttle, and being able to board their vessel without being shot down by their weapons, which means you need to disable those first. Once you're aboard their vessel, you then have to exit your shuttle, fight your way through their ship, all the way to their bridge, and then hold that bridge for a certain amount of time to achieve the victory. Meanwhile, they're trying to do the same to you. And I think that would be a really cool game mode, and it's something I'd certainly enjoy. So yeah, that's our idea for PvP. But as I say, that won't be part of the actual base game. That's going to be something you would select from the multiplayer menu as an entirely separate standalone thing, just as a bit of fun, basically. It's not part of the main game. Just just something to do for a laugh. If you're bored, go and do some PvP for an hour or so. And I'd love to see that as like an esport as well. I think that'd be quite good from a spectator's perspective. It should be quite cinematic. To rename these panels because they don't make a lot of sense. Yeah, Woodland Night, it's not quite that straightforward, because if we're talking a ship that a player is on board of, then that ship interior needs to have its full simulation running. And it's not so much the damage modeling or the combat side of it. It's literal just resource management and being able to have that kind of stuff within the game, all loaded at once into RAM. Everything costs RAM. Okay, so here's an example of the new loading infrastructure and the fact that we're now using these global event messages from the gameplay messaging subsystem. So something's not getting the event it needs, so it's just lingering on the loading screen without firing that off. So we just need to make sure we go through our event list and make sure everything's hooked up properly. Yeah, that's not a bad shout, Danger Mouse. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to see how that works in practice, but yeah, having a bit of a curveball where the opposing team activates self-destruct Could be an interesting one, although I would suggest that if you then leave their ship and just wait for it to blow up, you still win. Not sure if that would ruin it or not. Yeah, so we need to change a bunch of this. So the first thing we want to do before anything else is we want to load our space environment. So if we get rid of that, so our channel is startup init complete. Actually, that's going to go down here. So before we start loading the ship itself, what we want to do first is we want to load in our space environment. Environment. Don't want to use the macro. Because the idea here is that we're before we start, from a loading screen perspective, before we start building the ship on the loading screen, we want to generate the stars and things first. So we'll do that before anything else. Do our various bits of setup activity. Don't need that anymore. Yeah, this is just whether or not to load and unload our seasonal overlays, so that just stays waiting for that. This one is where we just set which vessel we're on. That's a bunch of junk I can delete. That one is our error handler. This is where we just set the state of the game, and there we're just setting some console commands. That's how we handle our post-process settings. So once it's done that like init stuff, then another blueprint is calling init complete, and with that we just have a string payload. If you don't have a payload, it doesn't fire the message, annoyingly, so you have to just send a generic string just so it's got something to send. And then we fade from black to reveal the loading screen, and begin loading the ship. So basically we don't start loading the levels until we're sure that all of the initialization actions have been completed already. So that should do that, and then where we're going to do something slightly different. Right now on the loading screen, it does the galaxy generation before starting up the electrical system. So I'm going to swap that round so that it does the level load first. So it loads all the decks in, then it initializes the electrical system. So at that point the ship is ready, the lights are on, everything's running, it's good. We then fade to black, generate the galaxy, because that's the thing that causes lots and lots of lag and stuttering. So we'll do that behind a black screen. And then when that's done, and it should only take 3 to 5 seconds at most, we then fade from black into your character in the game, and you can just immediately walk forwards and there's no lag or stuttering. And it's all about managing how long we stay black for when we do fade to black. If it's too long, and if it stays black for just like an uncomfortable number of seconds, then we might just have to suck it up and have that laggy behavior at the end of the loading screen. But hopefully we can do all of that under the cover of darkness so we don't experience the lagginess. But it does mean we need to rejig the order of things here. Alright, so load deck. So that's that bit done. Don't need that. Yes, we need to call a different event there. I did consider that, AJ. Yeah, having the galaxy rendered as kind of like sectors appearing as it's generating them in some kind of like digital display kind of thing, like it's almost like a UI display on a ship to show those things happening. Not out of the question. We could definitely do that. Probably before we load the ship, but don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. We can also do it async, because right now we're blocking on load for each level, which is why it stutters, because it's stalling the CPU thread in order to load in the streaming level, which is why it kind of goes when it's loading. But it's an awful lot quicker to do it that way. So it's kind of like, do you have the loading screen take an extra 10 to 15 seconds, or do you get it over and done quickly and put up with some stuttering while it loads? And it's kind of like a, which is the lesser of two evils, really. It does look particularly jarring in VR, having it stutter. So it may be that we flip this depending on whether you're in VR or not. But yeah, these are all things we can tweak. Not quite the illusion, because the galaxy generation is ship location dependent. So, and especially when we have multiple saves in the future, we cannot start generating the galaxy until we know where the ship is, because the 3x3x3 grid of sectors that surround the ship are obviously driven by where the ship is in the middle of the middle one. So we have to load the save game, find out where the ship coordinates are from that save game, and then generate the galaxy. Because what it does is the galaxy gen is constantly looking at where the ship is, and as soon as the ship moves, the movement of the ship triggers the regeneration of the galaxy, which is why things like wormholes will be really easy to implement, because all we're doing is updating the location of the ship, and then the galaxy will automatically go, oh, hang on a minute, the ship's moved, I better regenerate, and it will just regenerate the right bit of galaxy to match where the ship's gone. So we can teleport the ship anywhere in the galaxy, and it will automatically just go, all right, I'll update then. So wormholes, easy. But because of that, it means we cannot generate it until it's ready. So there's a lot of chicken and egg stuff going on during the loading sequence, and it's just about making sure that things don't get ahead of stuff. PSV, yes, when you're watching the ship being constructed, you're literally watching the levels being loaded, so it's very much a one-to-one thing. David, no, you raise a good point. So again, I've spoken about this before, and I also overlooked it for this ship as well. Being an atheist myself, I never think about needing a place of worship, so the thought of having a chapel just never even occurred to me. On the Magellan, we're going to have what is essentially a meditation room, so it's kind of like a multi-faith space where people can just come and sit in quiet contemplation. So whether you use it for your particular religion or not, that's down to the individual. Ultimately, it's supposed to be a quiet space that anyone can use for that purpose. I doubt the Caravella will have such, because it's crammed already. We're already running out of space. But yes, the Magellan will have something of that sort. We kind of called it the room of requirement, which is, it can be used for what you want to use it for. Or yes, as Delta points out, people do have their own crew quarters. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a person's crew quarters is the perfect place for that sort of thing. Right, I need my list. I'm going to pop this on the other screen so that I don't lose it. Let's just step through these events a minute. So I'm going to go through this in the steps that it actually loads things, just so we can make sure that everything is as it should be. And this is as relevant for the Caravella as it is the Magellan, because a lot of these assets are shared between the two. Right, so the first thing we want is our game instance. So this is quite a simple one. We pass the command line from Steam, and if there's VR in it, we launch in VR mode. Nice and simple. We don't need to do anything else with our game instance. We then go through our main menu, player starts the game, and we set, well, on game instance, funnily enough, we set our game type on. So game instance is a piece of code that exists throughout the entire gameplay, between levels. So from the moment you start up Unreal, your game instance is sat there and it's static. So it contains anything you set for the lifetime of that session. So if you set VR mode from the main menu, that will persist into loading whatever game you're loading. So that's why we use it there. We then fire up our persistent level. So this is basically the parent level that loads all of the sub levels, with each deck being a separate level. So the first thing we do is load our space environment, do our CVARs and things, and then we wait for init complete so we can start loading our levels. On our flyable ship, we also listen for init complete. That one is slightly different on the Caravella because the Caravella one does things slightly differently, in the sense that it's not using our flyable ship that we have on the Magellan with all the code that runs for FTL and stuff. The Caravella does it with proper sublight thrusters. For some reason we don't actually have it here, unless I called it something different. I think it was that actually. Yeah, it is. So, right, so this is our equivalent on this ship. So we don't actually want to do anything on this until the game calls that the initialization is complete. And then we can go ahead and do our begin play stuff. So one of the things it does is it does the loading. say it does the loading. Why is it not doing... Oh, there. Couldn't find it for the life of me. Yeah, so what we're doing here at the moment is we're setting the location of the ship manually. So that's both its galactic coordinates, and this is what drives the galaxy gen, and its local coordinates, which is where it physically is in the world. And this will drive both the galaxy gen, the system gen, the planets, and everything. All that gets generated from these two variables. We will require a separate save game for this ship. So that's something that we need to build before we can make this flyable. So before we release this ship to our admirals, we need to make sure that it will save separately, and we have the ability to select which save game to continue. So that needs to be a thing. Otherwise, it's going to overwrite the Magellan save game, which is not ideal. But yes, that's where our loading action will take place. So we need to replace the manual one with loading it from disk. Although that said, actually I'm going to replace that with the game state one. So game state loads the current loading, the save file, and stores it as a variable pretty much as soon as it loads. But we look at our list, and this is the execution order within Unreal as much as it is the game. So the persistent level loads and runs its begin play before game state does. So if we are loading the persistent level, spawning our ship, and it tries to get the save data to know where it is, then that won't be available yet because game state hasn't triggered yet. So it hasn't run its begin play. Which is why we need to call our initialization complete message to trigger our ship to then say, right, we've been through these steps, everything should be set, now we can load the save game. Or rather, now we can get the save game from game state, which stores it as a variable. And also handles the saving every 10 seconds. So it ticks once per 10 seconds, and every 10 seconds it will save the current state to disk, and it will just do that continuously. But we need to make sure that that is doing that when it needs to do that, and not before. Yeah, the Caravella we're going to make available as part of a Founders Edition. So when we go to early access, hopefully in December, we'll have the free version of the game, and then the Founders Edition, which will contain the Caravella and a few other bits of cosmetic stuff. Price to be confirmed, but it's almost certainly less than £30. And the idea is that that's just to help the ongoing development of the game. As I mentioned on the last stream, we don't have like a regular source of income for the studio, so we can't expand the team and take people on permanently because we can't pay them long term. So we need the game to be generating a regular monthly income so that we can then pay staff monthly out of that income. So hopefully the Founders Edition is going to give us that income we need in order to keep the studio running. So the Caravella is basically part of that. And that aside, we'll also have some just like support the developer packs on Steam as well. So if anyone just generally wants to support us, they'll be able to do so through Steam. Obviously with Steam taking their cut. So we're going to cast to game states again once init complete has been fired, and then we will just get our save data. So this is what game state is loaded from disk and stored. And within that save data is all the stuff we're currently saving. So as you can see, right now, we're not saving an awful lot of stuff from the game. So things like what UI screen you're currently using, like on the sensors, things like the state of the electrical system, which lights you might have turned on or off, what settings you might be using for lights. None of that is saved as part of the save file. So those are all things which need to be rolled into this as time goes on. So this save struct is going to grow kind of exponentially. As it does so, depending on what the impact is like when it's doing its save, we'll have to start saving less often. But again, we'll manage that as we go. But anyway, that gives us access to our two variables so that we can update these. So all we would do, in fact I'm going to just duplicate those a minute so that I've got a reference to the defaults, and then we'll just pop those in there. So now we are referencing our save file, and that's going to be at the moment the same save file as the Magellan until I go through and change it. Yeah, if they ban Steam in the UK, I'm moving. Steam takes 30%, I believe. Yeah, 30%. The fee is reduced to 25% for earnings over 10 million and 20% for earnings exceeding 50 million. That would be a nice problem to have, wouldn't it? But I can't see us making 10 million, so yeah, we'll be paying Steam 30% of our revenue. Yeah, ultimately, I mean, Ko-fi say they don't take a fee, but in order to not take a fee, you have to pay monthly. So it's kind of a lie, but not really. Right, so that bit's done. What's next? So our player controller is next. So let's just check that one out. I don't actually know anything about that CSI. I tend not to follow the news very much. I'm so busy just doing that I don't have time to stop and read stuff. Actually, let's just make sure that game state is doing what it should be doing. Yes, we're not waiting for anything. Blah, 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 blah. Load game. Yeah, so basically if we are the server or single player, we go ahead and load game, and that just loads all that up depending on whether or not you're in multiplayer or not. Okay, what this used to do up until yesterday, it used to broadcast this save data out as a global event. I've removed that in favor of things like the ship here, actually just getting that data from game state rather than waiting to be given it, so they can get it when they need it, not when game state decides to send it out. Again, because you get that things being broadcast before it's needed, and then it needs it, but it's already missed the broadcast. So it's easier if it just says, right, now I'm ready, give me the data. Right, player controller. So we check to make sure we're the local controller, because we don't want, in a multiplayer environment, this messes up all the time in multiplayer, where like you'll try and load player customization and it kind of treats it as the server. So you need to kind of make sure that you absolutely definitely enforce the fact it's a local controller so that that doesn't happen. And then we wait for the player character to say it's ready. Sorry, no, this is it saying it's ready, and we can do our fade to black and everything. So that's that one. Then we do galaxy ready. Actually, no, that's. Hang on. We want to be listening, not broadcasting. Listening for game. So that's string payload. That's more like it. Yeah, so we'll broadcast that from the character, and that will trigger this, which basically once we spawned our player and the player is in the world and they've finished doing all the spawn stuff, then they fire that event, which means that the player controller can then go ahead and fade from black back into the world. So you get a nice smooth start to the game. Yeah, so once the galaxy's done its job, it broadcasts that, which means that we can go ahead and spawn the player. Okay, player state does its thing. Okay, and then we need to do the batteries. And we need to do this for both the Caravella and the Magellan, because right now they're using copies of one another. Where are we? So when we previously sent this, and this is how we start up the electrical system on the ship, step by step, we have to, like, depending on whether we're cold and dark, we set different different values depending on that, and then we start actually ticking the batteries. So again, we need to make sure that we do that properly. I guess we're going to need a new startup, yeah, because we haven't actually got the electrical thing in there. So do I put it on startup, or do we put it on the electrical one? Is it under there? Where is it hiding? Ah, there. Gameplay tags, that's what I wanted. Yeah, so we've got two options really. We can add it on here. So we have startup. What did I call it? Init jitters. I think I probably will, just as it's part of the startup. I'll keep it separate from the electrical stuff. So init chillers, init tanks, init pumps, and init vector. Okay, that should do it. So the channel is going to be init. Oh yeah, of course we need batteries, don't we? Init batteries. Thank you, Celtic. Yeah, we're trying to get this out as soon as possible. Things like this, so having to go back and rejig how the game loads, and like the initialization and everything, is all part of a bug fixing effort. Again, we've got some really annoying fatal errors that occur that again don't have any usable debug messages. There's nothing in the log that says what has caused the fatal error. It's literally just a kernel 32 error, which is really ambiguous and difficult to track down. So as part of the troubleshooting process, again, I'm removing a plugin from the chain of events to make sure it's not that's causing the problem. And it was a plugin I was planning to get rid of anyway, so kind of two birds really, but it is a long-winded thing that just needs to be done. Right, so init batteries will then start that up, and we need to do the same for our tickable one. So this is the Caravella version of it, so get rid of that. Oh, it's doing that thing where it won't let me delete as I play the game every time. Oh, is there? Thank you. I never spotted that. Basically Celtic, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the time it'll tell you like which class is causing the problem, or even better, which line of code on which class is causing the problem. But in this case, it's just literally kernel 32 has failed, blah 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 blah, memory address, blah 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 blah, and that's helpful to nobody. And it's on a background thread too, so I think it's like worker thread 2, something like that. But I have no idea what worker thread 2 is. It's obviously one of the background threads. I don't think it's an engine thread. I'm pretty sure it's one of the plugins. But yeah, tracking it down, it's an absolute ball ache. But it's just a case of trial and error and ruling out possibilities until you narrow down on what the actual issue is. Like, because if I've removed this plugin from the startup process and the fatal error goes away, I know it must have been the plugin. So, like I said, I wanted to get rid of it anyway, so it's all good. Now, it is still causing an error, or if there is still a crash on startup, then like doing this work and kind of documenting step by step what happens during the startup process means that I can go through and, if necessary, I can, because we've built our own debug messaging system, I can display debug messages on screen for every single step that we go through, and then we'll know, at what point does it crash and what was the last debug message we showed. So then we know, right, so perhaps it's step 7. Perhaps the Galaxy Gen loading is doing something, or what is probably more likely, it's probably this. It's the Galaxy Gen doing the gen. It's the heaviest thing in this whole list. So we'll get there. We will get to the bottom of what is doing it, and then we shall stamp mightily upon that bug. Just let me delete it. I just want to delete it. Please don't make me restart the whole engine just to delete one blueprint. And delete. Come on, you can do it. What if I close that and open it again? There we go. Now I can delete it. Right, so this is also in its batteries. So that's that one done. Okay, next we have our cryo chillers. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, how nice would that be if you got paid for fixing bugs? Oh, thanks, the illusion. I shall give that a try next time that happens. Startup chillers. Okay, next be the tank. This one's chillers. What's next? Tanks. A thought occurs. So right now we are, or at least would be, calling these events at a 1 second interval. So we're giving the system 1 second in order to do its startup and set up all its variables. In most of the time, it doesn't take that long. So we're like unnecessarily delaying the loading screen. I'm just wondering whether or not we actually go through the electrical startup item by item without actually having to call them with delays, so each one triggers the next. So if we go to our battery, so we listen for initialized batteries, And then once we have gone through the process and we've started our management tick, what we can do then is initialize the next step in the chain. Where am I calling that? There. How did I get that last time? Get gameplay. Oh, that's weird. Why is it weird? I'll just copy it. Then we'll change this to, so I've done the batteries, so we'll do the chillers. So I might need to add a delay here if this is happening too quickly, but this will speed up the loading screen by probably 5 seconds or so. And then on the next step in the chain, which is our chillers. So message has been triggered, we do all our stuff, and then the last thing we do is trigger the next step in the chain. The payload is meaningless, it doesn't actually get used, but it won't send without one, so we're just sending it a meaningless string. So tanks was next, I think it was. Yeah, batteries, chillers, then tanks. So that would be init tanks. And then they do their thing. And then they trigger the pumps. Okay. So this was string payload, and the channel would be we're on pumps. And then we'll move on to the reactor. There's two of these because you've got one for the Caravella and one for the Magellan. So what this does, just as a final check before allowing itself to continue, is we check all the various states on the reactor just to make sure that we're getting the fuel, getting the coolants, and only then will it go ahead and actually start the reactor up. So if starting up is true, then it won't fire any of these shutdown events. So like if any of these were out of range, then ordinarily it would shut down. This just forces it to not shut down until it's ready. So when you're starting the game, if it's laggy and you have a really poor CPU, then sometimes the reactor will fail to start. This kind of safeguards against that a little bit, but it's not perfect. They could be. This is just a very rough check. It's not the actual check that's running within the reactor tick itself. This is just our, if these values are within this range, then it can run. That said, there will be a lot of refining that goes on around this as well. So right now the reactor simulation is very rudimentary, and we want to make that deeper and more involved, especially when we start adding additional components as well. So we want sub-components that can be removed and repaired and such. And once we start adding those into the mix, then a lot of this stuff needs to be changed anyway. But yeah, for now this is just can the reactor physically actually support starting up? That's all we're checking. And then when that passes its check, we can fire ship ready. And then ship ready, looking at my list here, blah blah blah. Yeah, so we need to fade to black. And then do the galaxy gen. So normally I would like get player controller and do the fade to black from here. But I'm just wondering whether or not we simply listen for this message on player controller and do it from there instead. So we're not doing that thing that I have a habit of doing, where you're driving actions from another class somewhere else. So I guess it's more, what would the word be? Like it's more the accepted process. It's more standard to do it from here. So as much as we're listening for the message there for that one, we would also listen for ship ready, that string, and then the only thing we would be doing here is just literally that, just start our camera fade. Oops. So that we're doing these things from the player controller rather than doing it like on some obscure blueprint like the reactor, which you'll never find in 6 months' time because you forgot where you did it. So we'll fade to black. And then on our galaxy gen, we are waiting for ship ready, so that one's I've already done. So we're not, so on its begin play, it basically waits and does nothing. Oops, that would help. Until the ship is ready, and then it will check. And again, the reason that's important is because we need to make sure that the right save game's been loaded, that we've preloaded the right coordinates for the ship, that the ship itself knows where it is and has picked up that save data and updated its own internal variables so it knows where it is. Because once that ship is triggered, it's now updating game state with its replicated version of where it is and everything, which is what this checks. So when we start checking our ship state, obviously we make sure that all of our stuff's been satisfied, and then we're getting our ship state from game state. And then if that has changed, so if we've moved our galactic coordinates somewhere else, then we go ahead and start generating our sectors and everything. So we just need to make sure that this is giving an accurate picture of the galaxy. In the dev build right now, when you enter the game, you get a couple of seconds of really bad lag because that check isn't happening. So it's actually it's only loading the right condition for the ship as you enter the game. So the galaxy gen is then regenerating the galaxy as you're entering the game, which is causing all the lag. This basically fixes that and stops that from happening. Right, so now that we've done that, so we do our init complete, we load all of our levels, so this here is going to be ship startup, which I have obviously already used. Yeah, okay, so that needs to be ship startup then. Ship startup. And then rather than calling these, we need to just do the one. Yeah, so basically all of that can be deleted. Get gameplay messaging. Oh, that. Send. No, can't remember how to do it now. What was it again? Broadcast message. That was the one. May as well steal that. Right, so we're actually going to send initialize batteries. That triggers the chain of events for starting up the ship. It does mean that in order for the game to successfully start, the ship must have those components on it in order for them to report that they're ready, obviously. If like the Caravella, if it doesn't have those components already, the game won't start. So we just need to make sure that they are there. Okay, so that basically kicks that off. We don't need this, I don't think. So yeah, we don't need to load the save game. We're already doing that. Right, okay, so we do actually need this, so we're only we're only doing the ship startup events if we're the server or single player, so we don't need that doing for clients. What is player character waiting for? Right, that's Galaxy ready, so yeah, so I guess if we're the remote, then we just need to send ship ready. Because we can skip that part. So that's going to kick off the Galaxy Gen. And the Galaxy Gen happens on clients and server because it's too much data to replicate. So we just keep local copies. It's the same for both anyway. Right, so we pop that up there a minute. So you fired that. Whereas you fire that. Right, so the question is, does this need any further involvement on here? Or can we get rid of all of this? So we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that on player controller, so we don't need that. This is irrelevant. So the payload we're sending can literally just be garbage. It doesn't mean anything. The message will not broadcast unless it has some kind of payload. So you can't just send an empty message. So I'm just doing a random string. It's the easiest thing I can think of just to get it to send. I'm not sure why that's a requirement, but it is. Yeah, so I don't think any of this is needed now. Other than removing this loading screen widget, which is here. Yeah, so basically we need to wait for that event and then fire that from here. So we need to, actually we can do that at the top. So if we get rid of that, pop that up there somewhere, we can just listen for Galaxy ready. So when the Galaxy is ready, we can get rid of the loading screen widget. I shall tidy up all this spaghetti once it's all nice and working. It's very true, Zelaf. Yeah, we can definitely, like when we when the message is triggered, you know, we can break that struct and report on that string value. So yeah, we can definitely use it for debugging if necessary. Galaxy Gen, that's what we need. So blah 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 blah, does its thing, blah 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 blah, and it sends our message. So, right, yeah, so right now in the game, it's waiting for this broadcast to happen before it can react and say that yes, the galaxy is generated. But we're going to do that from here instead. So we've been through where are we? So blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and this happens every time the ship moves 1 light year. So we're just going to put this behind a do once. So this will only ever call this once at game start and then never again. So get gameplay messaging subsystem broadcast message. And that would be galaxy ready. Make literal. Oh no, it could be struct, doesn't it? Make struct string. What did I call it? Global message. Yes, that one. Yeah, that. Yeah, so that should call that. And on player controller, this is when we spawn our character. So yeah, so when the ship's ready, we fade to black, and then when the galaxy's ready, we ultimately go through spawn our character, I think don't need that actually because it's already, we've already faded to black at that point, so we don't need to do it again. I'm going to remove that delay. So I'll spawn our player, which is this. So when we get to the point where we're spawning our player, that's when we lock in our customization, work out what ship we're on, spawn the player, blah 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 blah, blah, all the spawny stuff. Once that character has been spawned, it will fire that it is ready. So this one would be character ready. So ship ready fades to black, character ready fades from black. And then we just need to make sure that we call character ready from our player pawn. So if we grab our character, so basically once it's been possessed, again we will just do this the once. Just send a character ready. Because it's been possessed, it's ready for play, so we'll send that through. And there was one other thing I wanted to do, is we were setting setting input mode here. was wondering whether we do that here instead. So once the character is ready, then we give it the ability to actually like move. Right, but that should be everything. Just check this again, make sure that, yeah, we remove the loading screen widget. Actually, I guess we need to do that. Yeah, we might want to do that sooner, actually, because ship ready is causing us to fade to black. Yeah, so if I change that to ship ready instead of galaxy ready, it means that the loading screen won't persist when we fade to black. Right, there's a lot of moving parts there, so let's just see if this works. And this is where we need those debugs. So we've got as far as loading the end of deck 1. So that would be here. So we are authority, so we should be doing initialize batteries. So that would be init batteries. Now at this point, we've already loaded the batteries, so they should be there, which means they should have already registered and started listening. Yeah. I guess we're going to need one here as well, actually, because having all the levels being loaded triggers these actors looking for their attached cables, and we don't want them to start looking for cables until we know that all the levels have been loaded. So I think we'll insert that into our list because I haven't actually got that yet. So let's add another event in here. We don't need that. Okay, so basically at this point we would broadcast levels loaded, so that we know we have absolutely loaded all the levels that need to be loaded, and now we can start looking at other stuff. So we want to, oh yeah, look, there's a button for it. Never noticed that before. Oh yeah, I've already got it. So I did think about that at some point. Okay, so thinking about this, actually, once we've fired our levels loaded message, all of the cables, all of the pipes, all of the hardware, they're all going to start looking for connectivity, trying to find the thing that they're connected to. Now, what we don't want to do is then fire initialize batteries whilst we still haven't actually like identified what cables they're connected to. So I think what we'll do is we will add a small delay there. And that's probably going to be a potential point of failure, because, like, you know, how long's a piece of string? How long do we wait for things to be ready? You know, a lag spike will potentially make things not be ready in time. But if we give it a full second for all those actors to sniff out their connected cables, hopefully that will be long enough. Yes, thank you, AJ. I did actually look through that, but it didn't reference anything specific enough in order to be able to identify what's causing the error. Because Claire gets it quite often, and like pretty much every time she quits the game, it has a fatal error upon quitting. Now normally that's not a problem because you're quitting the game anyways. The real struggle is when it does it during loading. Yeah, can do, Illusion. The issue with that is there's going to be multiple hundreds of cables. So we would have to be waiting, well, we'd have to know which cables we're waiting for. Yeah, that would be a hell of a list to check through. It's not beyond reason. I mean, we're going to need individually referenced cables anyway once we do the 3D model of the electrical system for the holo display. So that, yeah, we are going to track that at some point. So maybe that's an improvement for the future. No, the way it works, so take the batteries for example. We've got these two events, and what we do is we look for actors that have the correct tag. Every single cable at the moment as it stands has a unique tag associated with it, and it keeps searching until it finds it, and then it clears the timer and sets a reference to that actor in the world. In the new way of doing things, which is what the Caravella is currently using, let me just find it a minute. So on this one, we've improved that process quite a bit. Obviously it's a lot less going on. What we do is we take our physical interface, and then what we do is we look for overlaps. So we look at which cable end is overlapping that interface. So those two overlaps then form the relationship. So it means those cables have to be physically connected together in order to be recognized. And again, we just go through the process of doing that and then set a reference to that actor. So in order for all these relationships to be set up, all that infrastructure needs to be physically there and loaded in the world, which means we can't start looking for it until we know that the levels have loaded, which is why we're waiting for that event. So once it receives the message, we can be reasonably certain that everything is there where it needs to be in order for us to successfully sniff it out. And I think what I will do, because there's about like 50 actors that use this message, is I will send both messages. so that we can do a gradual rolling over to the new system. So we'll send that one, and we'll also call global message by name. We'll send that one as well. So we're covering both bases. So anything that's using the new system gets the new one, anything using the old system gets the old one. So both should work. And if this doesn't start up, then we will start looking at doing some spam. Which is obviously happening there. Okay. So I suppose the first question we are asking ourselves is, I think that's the one that Caravella's using. Basically, is this working? So we shall use our string value, which we luckily have. We shall use our spam macro, which we luckily have. So we should have four versions of this reporting a message. Okay, which we do. So we know that all 4 batteries are indeed receiving that message. Oh look, that's the problem. So of course on the old one, where are we? I added that extra step, which I forgot to do on this one. Let's try that again. Okay. Well, that would suggest that our chillers are not getting the message, but we do have some. Where are we? Tech 4 interior. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we definitely have them. They're definitely in the world, and they're definitely using the right actor. Yep. Okay. Hey Derek, and hey Mike. Good to see you both. This is the second ship we're working on. None of them have been fully finished yet, so it's still very much a work in progress. So we're definitely getting the battery message. Let's try just doing that separately. There's no reason why going through there should affect it, but let's try it anyway. Sure it is actually getting to that point. No, it's not. Okay, that's weird. Why is it not getting that far? I wonder if we're failing to get our game instance. This could be one of those happening in the wrong order things. Yeah. Okay, so the cast to game instance is failing. Oh wait, is that because I renamed that? Let's just replace that reference a minute. See whether that fixes it. No. So the only thing I can think of is because I renamed game instance earlier, it's broken the reference to it. Now I did fix up all the redirectors, so that shouldn't have done nothing. Let's quit the engine a minute. And reload. Yeah, the fish tank is the constant companion. quickly googled that and someone says check maps and modes, so I'll have a quick look. Hey Dongo. Probably because of that. So I'm assuming get game instance was returning a null value. Yeah,